Okay, I'm back. So let's see if all that works for just importing the template version and making a custom aura. So my idea is you want to show a little timer that ticks up the time that you've spent in combat with bosses, and maybe we can add something. Maybe we can say there's particular sections in the fight that we want to be alerted about. I've not really thought about that bit through yet, but we'll see how that goes. So we will use events, custom event, and we'll use an encounter start and encounter end. These are only triggered whenever you get into combat with something that is considered a boss fight by WoW. It maybe isn't as simple as it might seem. Some things don't have boss frames, but they are considered an encounter. But and like world bosses, I don't know whether they have boss frames or not, but they're not considered encounters, I don't think. But anyway, for stuff like raids and dungeons, this is a pretty reliable way to know when combat has started or ended. So actually, there's something. So I set up. Let's remember to fix that after. So I set up the template thing to use status, I think, and so it's not there for events. I'll fix it later. So coming into here is an event, and these events both give their encounter ID, the name of the encounter, difficulty, the size, so the number of people in the raid, and encounter end also carries success, so whether you wiped or whether you got the kill. Not sure how much of this we're going to use yet. Maybe we'll use the name, and maybe on the encounter end we'll send print a little message saying how long we were in combat for and whether we wiped or killed or whatever. But initially we can just return event equals encounter start. But actually we don't just return it, we say if the event is encounter start, then we'll take note of the start time when that happens, and then we'll return true. And the only events that are coming into this custom function are encounter start and encounter end. So we can leave anything that's not encounter start blank, and just like we described earlier, if it comes into this code block, it doesn't trigger this, it's not encounter start, it's encounter end, then it'll end effectively returning nil, which is the same as returning false as far as this is concerned. And so then we will run our custom untrigger at that point. And so this, actually we can just copy this from the start. And so we should never actually get the encounter start come through to here, but we'll add in the check just to be sure. If the event is encounter end, then and yeah, let's do a quick print. So local combat time would be, we know that on the encounter start we will have logged the time, though we can error check just to make sure if that was ever nil, then at least we won't throw errors. So is aura env start time, I think is what I called it, and get time minus start time or 0. So if this all did run fine, we had a start time created, then we'll set combat time to the current value of get time minus that start time, and if it isn't for any reason, if that did error out, then we'll just make it 0. And that success value, if I remember right, is a 1 or a 0, which is a little bit odd, but Blizz does it sometimes. So the kill will be 1 success equals 1 and kill or wipe. So then we can actually just send that to print. We could send it to send chat message so that everybody sees it, but in this case let's just do a quick print. So we'll print either killed it in however many seconds or wiped after so many seconds. And then, because this is the encounter end, we'll clear or start time at this point. We don't need it anymore. And we'll return true. So this is the untrigger. So we're returning true from the untrigger. We'll untrigger the whole aura. Just wondering, since we've made this an icon, I mean obviously it would be more natural as a text. Since we made it an icon, is there a way to get the this image here? I imagine it would be very difficult to do it. It would be nice though, wouldn't it, to show the little boss image. I think actually the encounters as listed in this dungeon journal aren't the same as the encounter ID that we use in these events either. So it's not even like we could go hunting for that by that ID. So yeah, as nice as that would be, I think that would be just too much work for right now. If you were going to make this, you know, a really solid thing to be imported by lots of people, I think that would be a cool thing to do. But actually, screw it. Let's just make it a text aura so we don't have to deal with any of that. Okay, so here in custom text, we know that on the start of a boss fight, we're gonna have the time logged, so we can just check that that exists. And then we don't actually just want to give a number of seconds, we want to have it formatted a little bit better. And Blizz has a couple of functions that we can use for that. Seconds to time, I think, is the one that I use most often. If we /dump seconds to time, say 111, and it returns this that's cool. So it's using a load of escapes. These pipe 4 and stuff are ways to make that work in different languages and the way they use numbers. But that's using these not so very abbreviated versions. So seconds of time also carries a whole load of args with it. You can remove seconds with the next one. We don't want to remove seconds, we want to see those. This already is abbreviated. Okay, so there's also another function called seconds to time abbrev. Let's see what that returns. That's very abbreviated. So this is the one that we actually see quite a lot on icons and stuff, on default Aura icons. So if you're just over a minute, it'll actually round all the way up to 2 minutes and just show 2M on there. Well, we don't want that either. Get time string from seconds is another one. Now that's maybe a little bit neater. We can, so this has args as well, so time amount is the first one, number of seconds. Whether you want to show milliseconds or not, we definitely don't for this, but that's the second arg, so we can return false for that. Drop 0 hours is the third one, and we do want to do that, so we come down to just minutes and seconds. So I like this one, get time string from seconds, we'll use that. Oh yeah, after all that I forgot. False, true. And we'll also do that in our run trigger, instead of just returning this number of seconds here. Let's copy this here, throw that into the run trigger, so when we exit combat, it'll print that time instead of just a number value. This also actually has the benefit of you'd have a lot of decimal places on this number as it is. Get time minus start time will be a very precise number of kind of milliseconds or whatever. This will get rid of all that as well, make it something a bit more human readable. Another thing we can do actually, so there's a function WeakAuras is options open, I think it's called. So you can basically return some test information so that while you're working on the WeakAuras you can see kind of roughly what it would look like. So again, if we do that, and so hopefully now when I click done, this is options open will constantly trigger because we've got the config open, and return that instead. Errors, why? Because I misspelled that, capital A. Okay, so there we go. It's giving us some value to look at, so then we can, you know, change the size as we need to or whatever. So what if we wanted something to happen at 40 seconds into every fight? Or what if we wanted to set some positions sometimes call them alerts. So we're making a table in init so that we can refer to it wherever we need to throughout the aura. Say initially we just wanted to be able to change the color based on this. So we want it to change color. Just thinking about the best way to format this to make it usable. So we could say between 10 and 20. And then say we want to be able to specify a colour for the text to go. So we could put in a string for that if we want it to go red. So we've got a table. The only thing is we'll have to iterate the table on every frame, I think, at this point, which is pretty boring. You know, the other thing is that we're not going to be able to easily test this without going and finding a boss to get in combat with. So maybe we adjust this a little bit and add player regen disabled and player regen enabled, which are the events that we generally use for knowing if we've gone into and out of combat. I think there's events for entering combat and stuff, but they're just not as accurate as actually using your regen starting to know. Because this event will tell you things like whether you can, you know, mount up again after combat or that kind of thing that's prevented while you're in combat. So now, and say we also make a setting. So aura env bosses only would be true or false. Right now we'll set it to false. So then in the trigger we can say if encounter start or not bosses only and event so two things will make this trigger, either if the event is a boss fight starting or if our setting for bosses only is not true and the event is player region disabled. Then we'll get start time, will return true. On the untrigger, just thinking about this though, we probably don't need to check this bosses only thing in this case, because no matter how we started things, we're either gonna although we don't want to untrigger on no, okay, let's add that back in. We don't want to untrigger on, say, player region enabled fired before encounter end. Then we'd untrigger, we'd lose everything, and then we'd never actually get this nice print with the extra information from encounter end. So we will add that check in. So to this now, it's where it gets a little bit more complicated, because if we are triggered from this by something other than encounter end, then we won't have this information actually. So kill equals success and success equals 1 and killed in, or success equals 0 and that, or empty string. Well, that probably needs testing, but in theory what I'm doing is checking if success exists. If it does and if it equals 1, then it'll be that, or if it does and it equals that, then it'll be that, and if none of that is true, then it'll just be an empty string. And I just thought we can remove this bit because we're actually using a formatted string for the time now. So hopefully now we can test this thing by just getting into combat with this. Hopefully no errors. Let's find out. Oh, that looks like it's working. So we've got a timer that's counting up as long as we're in combat. Now if I run away and we get out of combat, it should stop, and we've printed the time without errors. Fantastic. That's great news. So then back to this table that we made. we're trying to make a start time and an end time for the colour changing to this, I guess, is what we're doing with this. So yeah, I don't think this is a very efficient way of doing it, but let's play this through and see what we get. So in our every frame section in the custom text, we'll actually make a var for combat time, which is this, and then we can use that in there. So yeah, this is the kind of inefficient bit. So for yeah, we've got a table, and the table is full of tables. We're not using any keys for the tables that we made in init, so that's why we can just use this little underscore. We're just going to abandon that information. V will be the table of info, so let's call that table, why not? In pairs, and then the table we're talking about here is alerts, I think I called it. So for each one of those subtables in alerts, we'll say if combat time is greater than the first number or the first value in that table and combat time less than the second number in that table, then and what we'll do, before we start iterating, we'll create a var called color, and we'll make that white. So back in the iterator, if the current state of our combat time is greater than the first value and less than the second value, so it's in between those 2 points, then we can change the color that we made before the iterator. So we'll stop it being white and we'll make it table value 3. And we'll also break out of the iterator at that point. So as soon as we've found something that hits with the values we want, we'll get out so we're not doing any extra iterations. And end to get out of the iterator. And so now we've got a colour with a base colour, so if none of the values we've got want to change the colour, then we're happy with just white. And so then we'll format this string. You don't actually have to put the PyPar on the end to close a colour if you're not doing anything in the font string after that. Basically it would just, if there were anything else after this timer, it would also be coloured if you don't put the PyPar. But I'll put it in just for completeness sake. So hopefully now, oh yeah, so after 10 seconds in combat, hopefully it'll change colour to be red. Let's go and find out. There's 10 seconds, it's gone red, and I think I set it to stop doing that at 20. There we go. So it works, but we've now got something that on every frame every time, your FPS. So every frame of your FPS, it's looking through that table. It's comparing a bunch of numbers. Which, isn't so bad, really. That table is, always going to be fairly small. And if the first value doesn't hit, if it's not greater than the first value that's given, then the second one won't even be looked at. So this isn't prohibitively expensive to be doing, really. But it doesn't feel particularly nice to be doing it that way. Though I must admit, my only ideas for making it better involve more code than I probably really want to get into right now. Though maybe we could so you might just want to only do these things on particular encounters. And encounter IDs tend to be something like that, don't they? Like a 4-digit number. So then we'll add that to the table. In the trigger we need to grab the encounter ID. I've got a feeling that WeakAuras might already be tracking this. Does. So instead of us grabbing that, we can actually use, it's called WeakAuras.currentEncounter. And I added that in the table 4 slot here. So before doing anything else in the iteration, we can do if table 4 exists at all, and table 4 equals current encounter. Or not table 4. If there's no value given, then we'll do this. We'll consider it not an encounter specific alert that we want. Let's just do that the other way around. And that's a total pain to test, actually. But I think that should be fine. We'll leave that as is. I just thought the other thing, say we want to take the encounter name that we would need to grab ourselves. And we'd clear it as well on the end. And we throw that in the name dynamic information. And that wouldn't matter if it were nil. Oh, what have I done? So I think we can just return that. If it's nil, then it'll just be empty. If it's got something in, then it will carry it. And then here we can do %n. Put that on a new line from the other thing. Make it centered. So then it would show the bus, the encounter name, and then the time that you've been in it. Let's add that into the untrigger as well. And instead of a blank, let's just put that for when we're not coming out of an encounter, we're just coming out of regular combat. Aha! Let's carry on because it's not getting untriggered. Because encounter name cannot be concatenated up when it's empty. So I'll make it not empty. It should do as there we go, combat ended. So you can imagine how far you could take this. You could add much more to this table and running in specific times. You could, instead of just changing the colour, try and make it play sounds or stuff like that. All of which would take a fair amount of coding to do, but you can see how starting with just some pretty basic information from getting into combat, you could then actually start to give yourself all sorts of info during combat or throughout the combat period. So I hope that gives some ideas on what you can do with WeakAuras anyway. And I'll leave it there for today. I'll probably throw this on Waco somewhere and then link it on YouTube when I upload this. Anyway, thanks for watching.